Thank you so much for getting me to this wonderful place. More importantly, to meet all these wonderful people. Today I'm talking about the dangers and damage caused by so-called alternative medicine. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Then I'm going to speak about direct risk, indirect risk, and eventually come, hopefully, to some conclusions. It's a big subject, and I apologize if I'm merely scratching the surface on these complex issues. Background about myself. I studied medicine in Munich, and that's quite important. My very first post as a junior doctor was in the only homeopathic hospital in Germany at the time. This is where I learned homeopathy and lots of other alternative treatments, hands-on, basically, without ever making any diplomas, etc. But I treated patients, and I've often said it, I was very impressed because patients not only not died when I treated them, but they got better. And somehow this raised a lot of questions in my mind, which I carried through my career. I trained as a conventional physician, and that's also very important. I went to London and for the first time to England and became a scientist. I find that important because as a medical student or even as a doctor, you very rarely learn to think critically. You don't usually think as a scientist. And in London, I did have time and very good tutoring, and I became a scientist. I made a PhD thesis and went back to Germany, specialized in rehabilitation medicine, became professor of rehabilitation medicine first in Hanover, then chair of rehab medicine in Vienna, Austria. That was a post for life, but I surprised everybody by leaving it only 3.5 years later, taking over the first chair in complementary medicine worldwide, I think, in Exeter. I stayed in Exeter for almost 20 years, built up a team of multidisciplinary scientists. We didn't have clinical duties, and we researched all sorts of alternative treatments. In 2012, I retired, and today I'm trying to enjoy life, write books, and run a blog, which you're welcome to visit. If that is not detailed enough, I also have written a memoir, because these bullet points don't quite disclose how adventurous my life, for instance, in Vienna, but also in Exeter, turned out to be. So, you have remarked, no doubt, that I don't speak of alternative medicine, but of so-called alternative medicine. Why do I do this? Two reasons. If a therapy does not work, it cannot possibly be an alternative. If, however, the therapy works, it also isn't an alternative, but it's evidence-based medicine. So I think so-called alternative medicine is a better term, not least because I wrote another book with that title. A little bit about scam, as I shorten it. Much of it, as you probably know, is implausible and unproven. Nevertheless, it's immensely popular in virtually all Western countries, and it has the reputation of being gentle, safe, and wonderful. Patients, very often, I'm not quite so sure about the Netherlands, but in most countries, patients pay out of pocket for scam. And the press is intensely interested. While I was still working in Exeter, I had virtually every other day some journalist on the telephone line. Now it's calmed down because I'm retired. Consumers are bombarded with misinformation. If you go on social media, you can very quickly confirm this. Many VIPs promote scam. By VIPs, I mean anything from royalty to football players. As we will hear later this afternoon, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm talking, as I said, about the risk, and I find it helpful to divide the risk into, firstly, direct and indirect risks. The direct risks, I ought to mention, and this is important, that in so-called alternative medicine, we do not have preclinical testing as we would have for any new drug that comes on the market, simply because they're traditional treatments by and large. And we don't have any reporting, routine reporting of adverse effects as we have in conventional medicine. Therefore, we rely on anecdotes mostly. Here we have some own data. Shortly after I arrived at Exeter, we did a large survey of about 4,000 British scam users, and we asked them whether they had experienced adverse effects. They told us that in about 16% of the cases they experienced adverse effects after spinal manipulation, about 13% acupuncture, about 10% homeopathy, and about 8% in herbal medicine. Notably, at the time, this was so sensational that we managed to publish it in Nature. Today, we know that our data was mostly wrong. The actual evidence shows that about 50%, 50, every second patient experience adverse effects after spinal manipulation. With acupuncture, we guessed pretty well. Homeopathy, it should be about 20% because homeopaths themselves say they expect what they call a homeopathic aggravation in about 20% of cases. And with herbal medicine, we can't really tell because it really depends on which type of herbal medicine we are using. In addition, I should notice that we also have fatalities being reported, well over 100 cases in both spinal manipulation and acupuncture, and well over 1,000 patients of fatalities with herbal medicine. What is happening in these severe cases? Acupuncture, for instance. Acupuncturists often acupuncture in this area because there's an acupuncture point, and there you are in a slim person only about 1 centimeter away from the lung. If you puncture the lung, you have a pneumothorax. Acupuncturists do this often bilateral on both sides. And if you puncture the lung on both sides, you are either very close to an intensive care unit or dead. Alternatively, another acupuncture point is around here, over the sternum, and 6% of the population have a hole in the sternum without anybody feeling it because it's closed by tendons. If the acupuncturist puts a needle in there, he is in the heart, and then you have a heart tamponade, and your chances of surviving that are very slim. The risks of spinal manipulation are multi, and the most important in bold vascular accidents, and vascular accidents often followed by death. What happens is a little anatomy here. In red, we see the vertebral artery, which kinks over the first vertebra, and with certain forceful movements, this artery is overstretched, breaks up, and bleeds into the brain, and then you have a stroke, and you can die of a stroke. The risks of herbal medicine are multiple. First of all, we have to acknowledge that there are many thousands of different herbal remedies. Some have toxic compounds. Many interact. Often they are contaminated. Often they are adulterated, which is not the same as contaminated. Adulterated means willfully added often powerful drugs like antidiabetic drugs, etc. And very often the products that consumers buy don't even contain what it says on the bottle. This young man decided to change his looks. And how did he do that? He took colloidal silver, which is a supplement, a non-herbal supplement, and if you take it in high dose, you might end up looking like him. This is the beautiful back of Gwyneth Paltrow, who earns millions by selling quackery. And here she displays little round marks which come from cupping. She obviously likes cupping. This man also liked cupping, but doesn't look so good. Cupping can always causes these marks, but sometimes, particularly in the version of wet cupping, gets inflamed and can cause abscesses, etc. Again, I need to stress that we are almost certainly looking at the tip of the iceberg. There is no reporting system, and therefore we really don't know the incidence figures. We did a survey with British neurologists who reported that within 1 year they had seen around 35 severe cases of adverse effects after spinal manipulation, which is not sensational. The sensational bit of this survey was that none of these cases had been reported. Had we not asked the neurologists, we would have never known. So underreporting in our case was precisely 100%, and I suspect that is not an exception. So, in conclusion about the direct risks of scam exist, but much more important, in my view, are the indirect risks. More important and more complex. I have divided them into 8 different categories. The incompetent therapist, advice for ineffective treatments, discouragement of effective conventional medicine, invalid diagnostic methods, violation of medical ethics, waste of money, damage to the environment, and undermining science and rational thinking. I'll take you through these. And again, I have to apologize for just scratching the surface. In Germany, we have the Heilpraktiker. I'm sure you know about the Heilpraktiker. They have been a thorn in my eye for a very long time, and one day I had enough and I wrote a book about it. They are uniquely incompetent. And just one example, in 2023, a German Heilpraktiker injected silicone oil into the penis and testicles of a patient who shortly after was dead. The advice to take ineffective treatments, here another example, homeopathic insulin. If a patient with type 1 diabetes follows this advice, he or she will soon be dead, which has often induced me to saying that the homeopathic remedy might be harmless, but the homeopath isn't. And the confidence with which scam practitioners, not just homeopaths, issue medical advice seems inversely proportional to their competence. Next topic, invalid diagnostic methods. I have depicted 6 of them here. You can see applied kinesiology, pulse diagnosis in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, tongue diagnosis in traditional Chinese medicine, reflexology. Some reflexologists, or most reflexologists, diagnose according to the sensitivity of the sole of the feet which organ in your body is diseased or in trouble. Iridology, the iris serves identifying which organ is in trouble. And as an example of more modern gadgets, acupuncture according to Voll, which also is used for diagnostic purposes. You might think that invalid diagnostic purposes can't do much harm. I would disagree. They cause false positive diagnosis and false negative diagnosis. Here we have an example of a false positive diagnosis. And a false negative diagnosis usually is much more severe. For instance, a patient feels unwell, goes to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor says, yeah, of course, you have subluxation of your spine, treats that person, due to the placebo effect, that person feels a little bit better. That goes on in a series of treatments of several months. Turns out the patient has cancer and has missed her chance of getting cured. That is the problem also of a false negative diagnosis. Violation of medical ethics. My next point, again, a very complex subject, so complex that together with a brilliant ethicist, Kevin Smith, we one day published a book about it. if you're interested. I'm picking out just one single issue of these complex ethical violations by scam practitioners, and that is informed consent. Imagine informed consent with a homeopath. If that homeopath adhered to the regulations of informed consent, he would have to say, I have no idea how homeopathy works. In fact, the scientific evidence shows that it doesn't work, and therefore homeopathy can delay effective treatments, of which there are plenty for your condition, for your disease, but unfortunately I know nothing about them because I'm a homeopath. In that case, you can imagine that the patient would start running and the homeopath would not earn any money, and that's why it's not happening. In scam, medical ethics are being violated every single day, 1,000, if not 1,000,000 times. My next point, waste of money, I'm going to make that very, very short because you're going to have another lecture on it. Suffice to say that at present, worldwide, we spend $230-odd billion on scam. If we agree, and I think we probably can, that most of these scam treatments are useless, then this has to be a waste of money. Interesting is the prediction as depicted in this slide. There are plenty of predictions. This is just one of them, and you can see that this almost will almost exponentially increase the waste. Damage to the environment, that also is almost self-evident, particularly in Asian herbal medicines, Tibetan and Chinese, etc. We are using endangered plant species quite regularly, which no doubt has to be a damage to the planet. Also, in traditional Chinese medicine, we are using animal products, rhinus horn or tiger bone for impotence, for instance. Which brings me to another very complex issue, which I think is very, very important indeed. The undermining of science and rational thinking. Voltaire has phrased this unknowingly best by saying, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Somehow scam seems to almost magnetically attract all sorts of other nonsense. And when it comes to atrocities, nobody can ever beat Heinrich Himmler, who was the Nazi most singularly responsible for the Holocaust. That is very well known, of course. What is less well known is that he fancied himself as a scientist. In fact, he was a pseudoscientist and initiated all sorts of experiments in the realm of alternative medicine. Echinacea experiments in Auschwitz, experiments on homeopathy in Dachau. Leopard lily is a subject that I'm just finishing a book about. A herbal remedy, Polygal experiments on a biological treatment in Dachau, Schüsslersalz, Spagyric medicine, and Velida, all in Dachau. To just depict you the unbelievable cruelty and atrocity of one of these polygal was believed by an investigator called Sigmund Rascher in Dachau to be an anticoagulant, and he selected healthy volunteers from the prisoners, shot them in their extremities, and determined whether his remedy, which he had patented and wanted to go on the market with, would stop or decrease the bleeding. Very few of these prisoners have survived. And here is again Heinrich Himmler in the company of Rudolf Hess, opening the 12th International Homeopathic Congress in August 1937 in Berlin. That was the starting point of the biggest research project that homeopathy has ever experienced, even to the present day. Many clinical trials, basic research. The Germans thought homeopathy would be wonderful. It was cheap. It was Germanic, and therefore they had this huge program of testing it. The results were entirely negative, according to a witness report from Fritz Donner, who was one of the main investigators. But the documents vanished in the hands of homeopaths, understandably, because they didn't like the results. And of course, we have to look to what Hannah Arendt said, the essence of evil is the refusal to think. And these two guys come in, at least into my mind when I read that. You may have noticed that I have left out one of the points on my list, namely the discouragement of effective interventions. I left it to the last because quite possibly it is the most important. Here we have a little survey that almost cost me my job in Exeter. We pretended to be at the height of the MMR scare. We pretended to be a mother worried about vaccination. And we wrote to all homeopaths whose email addresses we could find, altogether 104, and asked them, should we vaccinate or not? Then we had to inform them that this was not a real email, but a research project, and they had the opportunity to withdraw their responses. 77 did not withdraw their responses, and of these 77, only 3% recommended vaccination, 40% advised not to vaccinate, and the rest was somewhere in the middle. This confirmed lots of research that had been done internationally, that SCAM practitioners tend to advise their clients against vaccination. It almost cost me my job because the homeopaths then complained to my university, and I was told by my university not to publish, and I showed them my middle finger and published, and I was investigated and in the end just reprimanded but not dismissed. Another example, a list of some of the research, by no means all of the research, that suggests cancer patients using SCAM shorten their lives. Most impressively, this was shown by an American group, Johnson et al., who demonstrated that the use of complementary medicine in cancer patients, a mixed group of cancer patients, reduces the 5-year survival by 50%. 50%. And this is not the alternative use, this is the complementary medicine use. And they explained this by saying the exposure to alternative practitioners and their advice maybe not to take the mainstream treatment all that seriously, because after all they use SCAM in addition, leads to less compliance with the mainstream treatment and therefore to worse clinical results. The end is near, and I'm coming to my conclusions. The first one, the popular notion that SCAM is gentle and safe, as indicated initially, is definitely misleading. SCAM has many direct risks, some of which are serious, as I have shown you. Yet more important are the indirect risks, which are complex and manifold. Both indirect and direct risks are woefully under-researched. There's virtually no research group in the world that focuses on this subject after my department had been closed through some royal intervention. Fifthly, the total damage caused by SCAM, like premature death, etc., has never been accurately quantified, but seems to be considerable. And that begs the question with which I'm finishing my talk: does SCAM do more good than harm? I'm sure you get the impression that the answer is negative to that, but I should warn you, you can't answer that question. It's unanswerable. You need to answer it specifically for each of the many alternative treatments and diagnostic methods, and possibly even more specifically to every single diagnosis, because these treatments tend to be used as a cure-all, and it might very much differ whether you treat somebody with back pain with manual therapy, or whether your patient receiving manual therapy has asthma. So that is an unanswered question, and possibly unanswerable. It needs to be reformulated, and it generates a few thousand questions. I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ernst. Well, you're really preaching as an unbeliever for a parish of unbelievers. So, but there's no thunder and blitzen from above, so I think there are higher forces even agreeing with you, which opens the floor for questions. Dr. Schoneveld.
Thank you for your excellent talk. I wanted to ask you about the state in England, in the UK. Is there an organization like in our country, inspection should protect the patients, but is there an organization from the government that protects the patients against SCAM?
For those who didn't hear, I will repeat the question, particularly also online. The question is there in the UK a similar organization like our society, and is there some protection, maybe from official sides, against quakery?
Good question, thank you. Within the National Health Service, there is inspection, there is surveillance, and so forth. But as I think I mentioned, most of scam is happening outside the health service. So a homeopath, by the way, we all could be homeopaths tomorrow in Britain. You don't need any training, any proof of education or whatever. It's unprotected. And it's not, there is no, as far as I know, there is no organization that looks into it in terms of patient protection. If a patient gets severely injured outside the NHS, his main cause of recognition is to go to a lawyer and sue. And that happens quite often, and happens to be one of the reasons why we don't see the reports in the medical literature, because the court usually settles out of court with sums changing hands, and these sums and agreements involve a non-disclosure, and nobody is reporting these cases.
More questions? Professor Borst.
How about King Charles? When he was still a prince, he was known as Prince Quackery. And since he has been promoted, I haven't heard anything about him selling his usually quackery treatments. What is the situation now?
Well, you're quite right. As prince, he was one of the most powerful proponent of alternative medicine, not just in the UK, but probably worldwide. He was given a platform, for instance, at the WHO General Assembly, telling them that we all worldwide should use more ancient wisdom, as he often liked to call it. His ancient wisdom didn't stop him discontinuing my department, but that's a different story. When he became king, he had to shut up. So he doesn't speak about it anymore. He doesn't sell quackery, which he used to do. He had Duchy's Originals, 3 herbal remedies, which he sold basically in his name. He doesn't do any of this anymore, which doesn't mean that he doesn't hold many strings. We just don't see it anymore. That's the difference.
Are there more questions from the audience? Then I dare to ask a question. Oh, sorry, Dr. de Jong.
Oops, you mentioned a few fatalities with Heilpraktiker in Germany. Did Health Inspection Germany do anything?
Yes, health inspection in Germany exists. And the Heilpraktiker is officially recognized. There's a huge amount of Heilpraktiker practicing, and it exists, but it exists in theory. In practice, I really haven't heard of any action in that direction. I haven't even heard of Heilpraktiker offices being looked at or anything like this. I'm not sure whether they don't care or whether they're overwhelmed or both. But the fact is, it exists in theory and not in practice.
Last question over there.
One moment, please.
Hi, my name is Reusken. I'm an allergist immunologist. Are you aware of any research being done with the role of AI? I did some research with AI with some alternative diseases where it's Gemini and co-pilot was suggesting to go to an holistic physician because the disease it suggested it could be was not familiar for the regular doctors. Has anyone done research on that? Because that's a pretty concerning situation.
Yes, I'm sure that a lot of people are presently thinking in that direction. I've seen one or two publications about acupuncture and AI and in terms of identifying meridians and acupuncture points and that sort of thing. But it's very, very new. It's very new in conventional medicine and SCAM lagging always a little bit behind. It would be extremely new to SCAM, but I'm sure that within the next decade we will see much more about it.
I think this is a bridge to the next speaker already. Everybody's using ChatGPT now on his online and helps you also with homeopathic problems. I think this is a birthday card I have to give you. I don't know, but